welcome to tonight's beer review, which I am dubbing the somewhat unexpected beer review, because I'm going to be reviewing something I wasn't expecting to be reviewing, due to the fact that I went to Tamura's, and, yeah, well, it seems like the local liquor shops are running low on a lot of things, as might be expected during a pandemic. So, I went and got something from the same brewery, and that's the local brewery, of course. As you know, I specialize in reviewing local beers, even though that doesn't give me views. But I do it because I want to go and celebrate local beers. For all the 5 people who go and watch these to know local beers. And this is from the Lanikai Brewing Mauka to Makai series, which is one that they've been doing for a while. I don't know the date on this one. It looks like they didn't print it, but you can kind of see. They kind of just printed out a label and put it on there. So it's one of the more short-term ones that they've made. Looks like this one's been sitting on the shelf for a while. It looked like it was pretty dusty and they had like some crud on the cap. But I went and got it anyway. It's a quadruple. It's a quad. Belgian quadruple. So at 11.5 ABV, it's probably still good. One of these things can keep for a while at that ABV. So, 11.5 ABV, 24 IBU, and this is a Hawaiian quadruple aged over Jabotica berries. And it is what I am going to be drinking tonight. Honestly, if something must have spilled on it, you can just see over here, that, like, there's a little dot there, and I just, like, put my hand on it, and it just smeared off. And it looks fairly thick. Okay. Shall we? We shall. So I have a sick hand right now. It's taking up a lot of my time. And I'm looking forward to going and drinking this. Right off the bat, open it. Got that familiar Belgian yeast smell. Very estery. Big fruit. Pouring out into a Belgian glass, obviously. Giving a semi-vigorous pour here. Ooh. And a beautiful amber to ruby color. Opalescent, so some light clears through it, but there's clearly quite a bit of suspended objects. And a beigeish to bone white head. Fairly thin. Oh my god, this is boozy. This is very boozy smelling. If you remember, about a year or 2 back, I went and reviewed Swipe, which was a sort of home-brewed fruit moonshine, beloved by many a local person. And this is very reminiscent of that. That big woof, big whomp of booziness. Wine-like fruit notes. It's sweet, but not overly tropical. Underneath that, very sweet malts. Almost candied. I kind of wonder if they used rock candy in this, as many Belgian quads do, or if they stuck straight with a mash bill, and struck with straight grains and Jabotica berries for the mash bill. So sweet and candied, it's almost caramelized smelling. Caramelized fruit. Almost like tawny port smells as well. Very reminiscent of tawny port, that caramelized fruit, aged fruit. Hints of toffee. Definitely a lot going on here. As you can see, the thin head is mostly dissipated. That's just kind of coming from just the thickness of this, and yeah. Why don't we get to the tasting, shall we? Despite the big smell, not very thick on the palate. It's fairly light feeling on the palate. Light feeling in the sense that some wines are light feeling, so there is sugar there, but it's balanced by a high acidity. One thing that is incredibly striking to me about this wine, here you see me already going and messing up, is the contrast between the really sweet, almost candied nature of the nose and the surprisingly semi-dry taste on the palate. It is not sweet on the palate. Well, it is still kind of sweet, but it is surprisingly dry for how sweet it smells. And in the front, you have almost a wine-like note of acidity. Now, what is also interesting about this is while the booziness is apparent in the nose, it is not apparent on the palate all that well. You still get it as an effervescent note, but it doesn't particularly come across as boozy on the palate, which is kind of interesting. I've never had a quad like this before. Even the finish is somewhat dry. Yes, there is residual finish, residual sweetness, but there is also this tannic aspect that seems to be partially from the hopping, partially maybe from the adjuncts or, you know, the fermentation process, or even, you know, the type of Belgian yeast used. I'm not a master of quads by any means, being that they're a fairly strong style. And other than the Trappist ones, I haven't really reviewed them because I find them a little bit too rich for my liking. But this one, with its strong acidity, comes across as very well balanced in my opinion. You know, all these rich caramelized notes are like top notes. They're not tongue notes at all. You know, I don't feel it on my tongue. I don't taste it on my tongue, but when I breathe in, while I have it in my mouth, it smells, you know, like there's a candy note there. The booziness is starting to make itself more apparent as it warms up a deal, but it's still very manageable. And like I said, the acidity kind of cuts how much of an impact it makes for me. I find that booziness tends to be overwhelming when there's a very sweet malt base, but this one, no, there's this great balance to it. What would you just sort of say like an unsweet toffee would taste like? That's what I'm getting kind of from the front. That sort of almost burnt woody, burnt sugar flavor without the sweetness. The intensity of the smells, the high notes, are such that it's actually triggering a bit of a post-nasal drip for me. Which is kind of saying a lot. Pretty big flavors here. As for the alcohol level, like I said, there's booze, you know, you can taste the booziness, but it doesn't, you know, compared to some quads I've had, this would be kind of deceptive. You would think maybe, well, you'd still say it's a quad, obviously, because of the malting in the coloration, but, you know, you would think it would be lighter than 11.5, maybe like 9.0, 9.5 thereabouts. I'm really loving, you know, the wine-like notes, burnt sugar notes, the residual sweetness. It really plays across in very interesting ways on different parts of the tongue. The wine-like notes are kind of growing in the finish now. And this is really, for some reason, I don't know why, for some reason it's really triggering my post-nasal drip. I'm wondering if it's the Jabotica berries, but then the Jabotica didn't really trigger that. But even so, even with this sort of post-nasal drip forming from me drinking this, I am still, you know, it's so big tasting that it is still, you know, I'm still sensing it. So, I should probably go and explain the etymology of the name Ehu Girl. That comes from the term Ehu means light-colored hair in Hawaiian, and that doesn't necessarily mean the light-colored hair of a blonde, naturally blonde person, but instead the light-colored hair that comes from, say, a girl with long hair that spends a lot of time swimming in the ocean and sunning on the beach, and it sort of lightens, naturally bleaches dark-colored hair to a reddish-blonde color, and the Hawaiians call that Ehu hair. And the coloration of this beer is very much like Ehu hair. Black hair sort of turned a reddish blondish color. It seems a lot darker on the camera than it does in the light. It's probably should give it a good 2 shades up in the light here. Yes. So that's the source of the etymology there. Beer sort of has an Ehu hair color. And, what else is there to say? Well, this has been one of the more exciting quads that I've ever had. As you can go through my reviews, I don't really review quads all that much. It's not a style that is much to my liking. Like I've said previously in the review, I usually find them a lot more rich than I like. Same with a lot of barrel-aged beers. So I kind of avoid them. But this one is balanced by a nice acidity that I find very pleasant. And that the only downside would be, for some reason, it's triggering a mild allergic reaction to me and creating sort of a runny nose and postnasal drip. But that is very idiosyncratic to myself. I'm not sure if it's the Jabotica berries or some other aspect, maybe the yeast. I'm still finding it enjoyable, and it is fairly mild enough that I can drink this without much, I'll probably just blow my nose a bit, and I'll probably have a bit of a headache, a bigger headache than I usually would for a bottle of this type tomorrow morning, but, nothing too overwhelming. If you're the kind of person who has allergic reactions, well, you might want to take that into consideration. That is the only real downside. It's a quad that goes in very different directions. Some might, and I'm going to give the qualifier here that it might not be to style. I think that for a lot of people this would not be to style. For me, it's still hitting on the notes because of how much to style the bouquet is on this beer. And it is very much a style. It's just slightly more fruity than most quads are. But on the palate, it just goes in very different directions. And some people might, if you're really into traditional styles, really ticking off the style guide things, that might go and be difficult for you. If you're someone like me who finds the traditional style often a bit too much, well, this is something to definitely try. And it seems to be still quite a bit on the shelf for Lanikai, and I would imagine that's because quads not really being a popular style for local drinkers. Yeah, definitely go and get this one while you have the chance. It is a very nice... Wow, my nose is red right now. That is really hitting me hard, both alcohol-wise and, mild allergy-wise. It's still very pleasant tasting. And, yeah, I'm sure some of the trolls here, once I finally upload this, will go and make a note about, why are you drinking something that gives you an allergic reaction? Honestly, I'd say about 50% of beers give me a very mild allergic reaction over time, compared to, say, drinking whiskey or wine. I just really like beers. Go figure. And, yeah, give this a shot if you get a chance. I'm really quite pleasantly surprised by it. And that's your beer review for tonight, folks. Cheers.